It was an unprompted dream I awoke from on Wednesday, April 20th, 2011, triggered no doubt by the fact that I just agreed with the publisher to write a book on the story of Gobekli Tepe and its myth, religion, and the origins of civilization. I had already submitted a detailed synopsis and chapter breakdown and knew pretty well what I was going to write. Yet now I sensed that something was missing, a major piece of the jigsaw that my vivid dream suggested I would find if I looked in the right places. Somewhere in eastern Turkey, not far from the huge inland sea named Lake Van, a couple of 100 miles east of Gobekli Tepe, was, I felt, a church and monastery where the monks believed that the landscape thereabouts was the actual Garden of Eden. These were thoughts now going through my mind, even though 20 years of research into the origins of the Genesis account of the fall and its geographical relationship to eastern Turkey, for books such as From the Ashes of Angels and Gods of Eden had failed to uncover anything even remotely like this tradition. Temple in Eden. There seemed only one thing to do, and this was for me to re-examine the evidence that had led me to conclude that eastern Turkey, the former Greater Armenia, or Armenia Major, was the true site of the Garden of Eden, and to see if I could turn up any new leads that might throw further light on this puzzling mystery. This seemed especially important to do, as in 2009 there had been reports that Professor Klaus Schmidt had told British journalist Sean Thomas, writing under the pseudonym Tom Knox, that Gobekli Tepe was not the Garden of Eden, it is a temple in Eden. Although Klaus Schmidt told me in September 2012 that Sean Thomas had misquoted him, the German archaeologist had actually said that Gobekli Tepe was an Eden-like place, not a temple in Eden. The story became a news sensation with the headlines such as, "Do these mysterious stones mark the site of the Garden of Eden?" appearing worldwide. The German archaeologist obviously played down the matter, and eventually it did all die down. I actually apologized to Schmidt, as it was me who had given Sean Thomas instructions on how to get out there after he became interested in Gobekli Tepe through reading material I'd written on the subject. So if Gobekli Tepe was not the Garden of Eden, where was it really located, and how did the Genesis story of Adam and Eve and the fall fit into the emergence of the pre-pottery Neolithic world of southeast Anatolia? The existence of paradise. It was not until medieval times that people started looking for the Garden of Eden. Prior to this time, it was considered a paradisiacal realm created by God for the benefit of our first parents, Adam and Eve, who had lived in a state of perpetual bliss and happiness, not knowing death, pain, or hunger. Yet when they committed the original sin by eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and knew immediately that they were naked, God removed paradise from the reach not only of our first parents, but also of humanity as a whole. Never again would humans gaze upon the garden until the final judgment, when all righteous souls would be reunited with God in the heavenly paradise. In other words, there was no point looking for the garden, as it had no material presence in the mundane world. In fact, so detached from the physical world was it considered to be that some medieval theologians and church leaders thought that God had removed it to the vicinity of the moon. Even if paradise had existed in a material sense, there was no way it was accessible to humankind. It existed as a place beyond physical existence, almost like a parallel world, guarded by angels called cherubim, whose flaming swords protected its entrances with an impenetrable wall of fire. This was the manner in which paradise was portrayed on medieval maps of the world, as a walled garden surrounded by fire, existing just beyond the eastern limits of the Eurasia landmass. Adam and Eve, the serpent of temptation, the tree of good and evil, and the cherubim with flaming swords would all be present, as if to remind the onlooker where humanity might now be if the original sin had not been committed. Those church leaders or theologians who did not propose that the Garden of Eden might once have had a physical existence would be informed that if this were the case, then it would have been destroyed in the Great Flood. According to the Genesis account, this is all-encompassing deluge engulfed the entire earth, right to the highest mountaintops. Only Noah and his family survived by taking to the ark and eventually finding the sole piece of land that God has set aside to remain above water, and it was from here that the world began anew. Great Reform. There were the general accepted views that the Church of Rome held regarding the existence of paradise, and very few scholars or church leaders dared challenge these opinions for fear of being branded as heretics. It was not until the religious reforms of the 16th century and the birth of Lutheranism and Protestantism that attitudes began to change regarding the concept of paradise. This was helped by the discovery of the American continent, which confirmed that the known world was not surrounded by an expanse of water, beyond which there was nothing, a realization that led eventually to the abandonment of the long-held belief that the world was flat. The earth was a globe, and every part of it could be mapped and explored without fear of falling off into an abyss that existed beyond God's creation. So everything in the world became more tangible and fixed, and even the inspired word of God transmitted through the prophet Moses to create the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, became a subject to question for the first time. Church leaders, travelers, and cartographers began now to find firm geological clues in the Bible that revealed the true location of the Garden of Eden, which may now conclude had existed in the Bible lands themselves. According to the book of Genesis, as well as various apocryphal and pseudographical works of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim origin, the Garden of Eden was watered by a single stream that took its rise from a spring or fountain that emerged from the base of the tree of life. After exiting the garden, the stream then split into 4 heads that became the source of the 4 great rivers, each of which were named and described in chapter 2, the book of Genesis. And a river is going out from Eden to water the garden, and from there hence it is parted, and hath become 4 chief rivers. The name of the one is Pishon. It is that which is surrounded the whole land of Havilah, where gold is, and that the gold of that land is good. There in Havilah is the bullock and the Shoam's stone, and the name of the second river is Gibon. It is that which is surrounded the whole land of Cush, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. It is which is going east of Ashur, and the fourth river is Pharat, which is stated in Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14. Identifying these 4 rivers has always been key to locating the terrestrial paradise, and 2 of them are easily found. The last one mentioned, the Pharat, Kurdish Pharat, Armenian Arastani, Greek and Roman Arashani, is the Euphrates, the longest river in the Western Asia area. It has 2 main branches, the Karasu, or Western Euphrates, and the Muradsu, the Eastern Euphrates, which rise respectively to the north and northwest of Lake Van in the Armenian highlands. They then snake their way through southeast Turkey and merge together before passing into northern Syria and entering the Mesopotamia plain, in which is today Iraq. Just before emptying into the Persian Gulf, the Euphrates joins the Tigris River. There can be little question that the Euphrates was one of the 4 rivers of paradise, and this information alone should always have been enough to establish the geographical position of Eden as being somewhere along its course, yet we find again and again that this was often not the case, with the Garden of Eden being placed not just in the Bible lands but also in every other part of the ancient and New World.